Somewhere deep in the Atlantic Ocean, off the coast of Ireland, a black box was silently waiting to be found. Inside it was a story of 329 lives, stories of families, children, dreams, and goodbyes that were never completed. This was no ordinary crash. It was not an accident. It was murder in the sky. This is the story of Air India Flight 182, also known as Air India Kanishka, India's worst aviation tragedy, and honestly one of the deadliest terrorist attacks in aviation history. It was June 23, 1985, a Sunday. For most people, it was just another summer morning. But for the 329 passengers and crew boarding Air India Flight 182 from Toronto to Delhi, via Montreal and London, it was the last day of their lives. Among them were students, families returning home, grandparents, and even toddlers. The aircraft was a Boeing 747 named Emperor Kanishka, a name taken from an ancient Indian king. But that flight would never see the shores of India. Unknown to the passengers, in Vancouver, Canada, a suitcase with a deadly secret had been checked in under a false name, M. Singh. It carried no clothes, only a time bomb. That bomb was destined to explode mid-air. The people behind it? Sikh extremists based in Canada who were supporters of the Khalistan movement. Their goal? To punish India for Operation Blue Star, which had taken place just a year earlier in Amritsar, where the Indian army stormed the Golden Temple to flush out armed separatists. They wanted revenge, and they chose innocent civilians as their targets. June 23, 1985. Air India Flight 182, Emperor Kanishka, prepares for its journey from Montreal to London, destined ultimately for Delhi and Bombay. At 8:18 a.m. local time, the Boeing 747 lifts off from Montreal's Mirabel Airport, carrying 329 souls. Most are Canadian citizens of Indian descent. Luggage is loaded, passengers settle in. To everyone on board, it's just another morning in the sky. The boarding is routine. Pre-flight checks raise no alarms. But in the background, intelligence agencies in both Canada and India have been picking up vague warnings, hints of possible threats to Air India flights. Yet on this day, no specific alerts are issued for Flight 182. Hours later, at 7:14 a.m. GMT, as the plane cruises peacefully at 31,000 feet off the Irish coast, disaster strikes. A bomb, hidden deep in the cargo hold, detonates with unimaginable force. In an instant, the aircraft is torn apart, raining debris and lives into the cold Atlantic below. No distress call, no warning, only silence. Search and rescue teams from Ireland and the UK race to the scene, but hope fades with each passing hour. Only wreckage and bodies are recovered. There are no survivors. Responsibility is quickly claimed by Babar Khalsa, a Khalistani separatist group. Investigators soon trace the plot to Sikh extremists in Canada, bent on avenging Operation Blue Star, a violent clash at the Golden Temple the year before. The aftermath triggers the largest investigation in Canadian history. The RCMP, CSIS, and international agencies follow a tangled web. Multiple conspirators, suitcase bombs, and even a failed attempt to bomb another Air India flight in Tokyo that same day. Years of inquiries and trials bring some answers, but only a single conviction. This was the deadliest act of aviation terrorism before 9/11s. The world watched in shock as the tragic sequence of events, the missed warnings, and the enormity of loss came into focus. The day the skies fell silent, and history changed forever. This tragedy wasn't just caused by the terrorists. It was also a result of intelligence failure. Weeks before the attack, Indian intelligence had warned Canadian and international authorities about a possible bombing plot targeting Air India flights. But those warnings were not taken seriously. The baggage was not properly screened. The bomb went on board anyway. Another bomb meant for a second Air India flight exploded at Narita Airport in Tokyo the same day, killing 2 baggage handlers. That one had failed to make it to the plane. A second tragedy, barely avoided. For decades, the victims' families waited for justice. But the trials dragged on for years. Only one person was ever convicted, Inderjit Singh Rayat, the man who built the bomb. The masterminds behind the plot walked free, citing lack of evidence. The Canadian government took over 20 years to publicly acknowledge the bombing as a Canadian tragedy. Most of the victims were Canadian citizens of Indian origin, and yet, for years, their voices were lost in political silence. On a cloudy morning in Ahmedabad, India, in 2025, an Air India aircraft crash made headlines again. While that crash was caused by technical failure and not terrorism, for many Indians, it reopened old wounds. It reminded people of how fragile air travel safety still is, and how India has seen both the cruelty of sabotage and the tragedy of malfunction in its aviation history. From Indian Airlines Flight 605 in Bangalore in 1990, to the Mangalore crash in 2010, to the Kanishka bombing in 1985, and now the Ahmedabad tragedy, every disaster has left scars. The Air India Kanishka bombing was not just an attack on a plane. It was an attack on the idea of safe skies. It exposed how intelligence gaps, security loopholes, and political blindness can lead to unimaginable loss. Even today, many Indians don't know the full story. There are no memorials in every city, no textbooks carry the details, but the families remember, and so should we. 329 lives, lost, forgotten by many, remembered by few. If you've watched this far, you've helped keep their story alive. Let's never forget that what happened on June 23, 1985 was not an accident. It was avoidable. And every aviation tragedy that follows must carry the lessons of Kanishka so that history doesn't repeat itself. May their souls rest in peace. If you found this story important, like, share and subscribe for more stories from history that shaped our skies and our souls.